Okay, hello everybody. We will wait a couple of minutes for everybody to join, and then we will start our official part. And in the meanwhile, before we started this meetup, I asked ChatGPT to give me some topics for small talk for this event, and its suggestions were really stupid and some very flat jokes, so I will not use its advice. And while we are waiting, I was thinking that my emotions about introducing artificial intelligence in our lives and in our work was changing with the time and quite rapidly. And first I was really excited about all this technology and its accessibility. Then I was a bit scared. And then I was again excited about its possibilities. Then I was again a bit scared. Well, so now I'm kind of in the middle. I'm still hesitating about how useful it is. Actually, I think we can start. How many people we have now? Zoom changes its interface all the time. Okay, 30 people. Okay, we will start. So I will tell just a few words about who we are, because I think that there are some people who are new to our community. So I will say a couple of words. So we are a community of UX researchers in Ukraine, but we are often we make events also in English, not only Ukrainian, but Ukrainian language. And 2 years ago, before the war, we held an international conference, and we had speakers from Meta, from Interaction Design Foundation, from Uber, Zappers, so on. So now we make regular meetups. Some of them are in Ukrainian language, but some of them are in English language. And we put recordings of all our meetups on YouTube. So in follow-up emails that you will get after the meetup, I will put all the links to our LinkedIn page and to our YouTube channels and everything that could be useful. Okay, so today we have guests from the software development company, CI&T, which operates in, I think, all continents all over the world and has about 6,000 people, I think. I took this from Wikipedia. Okay, and here we have the guests from UX area. We have Fernanda, who is a UX research lead in CI&T. We have Max, who is the Senior Director Research and Insights. And we have Ola, lead UX designer. And I think they will tell a bit more about themselves later. And I forgot to introduce us from R9 UX research community. So I am a UX freelancer. My name is Anastasia, because here my name is saying R9 research community. And also we have here Andrei, who is, Andrei, how is your role? How it is correctly to say your role? Research lead, design lead? How it is correct?
It's the design director, but let's say design manager, whatever works.
Okay, Andrei works in EPAM, also software development company, also international, and also represented in all continents. So, guys, I'm very glad to have you here, and I'm passing the word to you. Please feel free to start and tell a few words about yourself and about artificial intelligence, how you managed to work with it.
Thanks, Anastasia, so much, and thank you everyone for having us. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. I need to get into slideshow mode.
Oh, I'm sorry, Max. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to say that we have captions here. And I think that if you need captions to understand what's going on here, then you need to turn them on manually. Everybody needs to turn them for themselves. The captions will be in the recording, but if you want to see them now, there should be somewhere in the tools panel. Okay, so sorry, I'm done. Max, please proceed.
No worries at all. Well, yeah, like I say, thanks for having us. We're really excited to share some of our experience of using AI in UX research and also in UX design as well. I should sort of preface all of this by saying that, you know, we're not experts in any way, shape or form more than you guys are probably experts. We're just riding the wave of AI at the moment, testing and learning and seeing what works for us in our processes and that kind of thing. So obviously we're going to give our opinions. Hopefully we're going to share a few case studies of things that we've used in the past, but you know, the world of AI is moving on such speed at the moment that, you know, I think the best thing for anyone to do is just to get out there and try stuff out, see if it works for them and their processes and that kind of stuff. So with that caveat in mind, I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself first, and then I'll introduce the other guys. So yes, I'm Max. I'm a Senior Director of Research and Insights here at CI&T. I've been in role for, I guess, about 9 years here. And you know, working very closely with the strategy department, the product department, and also obviously the XD team, so the UX designers and the designers. I'll pass you over to Fernanda to introduce herself.
Thanks, Max. Hi everyone. I'm Fernanda. I'm a user researcher lead. I've been at CI&T for a year, but before CI&T, I was part of a health tech startup and another big consultancy for some time. And yeah, very much enjoy my time at CI&T at the moment. And I'll pass on to Ola.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Ola. I'm a lead UX designer, but it does mean that I have done some research in the past and I work very closely with Fernanda. In fact, we're actually working on the same project at the same time right now, but yeah, work with Fernanda and Max and support them in research as well as UX design on my end. Thank you.
I'm just going to do the obligatory chat about CI&T and who we are. I won't take too long, I promise, because nobody's really that interested in this. But in terms of who we are, we're a global business. We are floated on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, I think it is. We have 6,200 team members across the globe, and we three all sit within the kind of the EMEA group, so the United Kingdom group, working closely with the guys at Portugal. In terms of user research, we are only about 5 strong full-time, mainly focused in EMEA, but we also then have support from about 25 UXers who do user research part-time. So we have kind of quite a large reach in terms of the sorts of research we're doing and the clients we're doing it with. But obviously, as any big business, we've got a way to go in terms of winning hearts and minds. In terms of who we work with, we're an agency, we're a digital product agency. We work with people from all over the show. We work across a number of different verticals. I think, you know, we really specialize in the insurance and finance sort of sectors, fast-moving consumer goods, big pharma, and also utilities. So actually, all 3 of us are currently working with different projects in the utility space, by which I mean energy sector. So within the UK, we represent 3 of the big 6 energy companies in terms of their digital production. And then I'm also working on a startup enterprise in terms of trying to build out a new business in the sort of solar energy space. So, you know, we work with clients from different backgrounds with different challenges. I'm going to pass over to Fernanda, who's going to talk a little bit about kind of our methodology, and then we'll get cracking into the deck itself.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, in terms of methodology, as you could see, we have different clients with different needs. So therefore, our methods could vary depending on the problem that we are trying to solve. But generally, we cover the 3 spaces in terms of research, which is exploratory research, which is more like maybe understanding user motivations, needs around like discovery type of work. Generative, when we potentially have already some generated ideas. So what are the user responses to those potential solutions or hypotheses, proving, testing those. And evaluative, sometimes we might go, for example, just with a client that has something quite clear in mind and we want to optimize things or validate and test different changes that will enhance the customer experience. But I just wanted to highlight that when we talk about these methods, what we aim with our work is to potentially include a little bit of all of them. And we sort of looking at this as 3 buckets of research that could all happen either together or when it's needed, like as a handover. So this could be like continuous ways of working and applying research. And then if we move to the next slide, the next slide, please.
You do not want to move in a second.
No worries.
Oh, I've gone too far. There you go. There you go.
Thank you. So, well, in terms of process, I'm quite sure that you have seen this classic discover, define, design, implement, and optimize methodology for ways of working in terms of design thinking. So this is how we like to approach our work. For those of you who may be new to this approach, discover is more like when you understand the needs, the problem, the landscape, let's say, and you do more like foundational type of research. Define is when you start to distill those insights and start to build on like potentially a strategy. Then on design, when it's starting to become a bit more tangible, you have wireframes, prototype, and then implement, you start developing, you start building, and optimizing is when you just want to enhance things. So this is the classic process that we follow. And as you could see, user research is end-to-end, and we have like work very, very closely with UX and UI. Similar to what Ola explained, we work very closely together in our project at the moment. And then I'll pass on now to Max.
I don't know why slides is being. Oh, yeah, gotcha. All right, so I'm just going to frame the conversation, and then we'll go to dig into some of the things we're looking at, some of the opportunities we see in the space around AI, particularly with regards to user research, but also UX design as well. Before I do that, though, I kind of want to sort of take a step back and think a little bit about technology and how it changes people's lives and the sort of the various stages it goes through. And it's probably quite important just to take that step because, as Anastasia said at the outset, you know, it can invariably be quite exciting, but also pretty scary when we think about AI. And in fact, any sort of type of technology or any type of fundamental change to the way we do things. And we sort of see this happening in sort of three stages. So initially you have a new piece of technology or a new idea that sort of lands in people's laps that helps you augment or intervene with existing processes. So the idea here is really sort of, a new piece of technology that makes things faster, makes things more efficient. It works in a sort of the foundations of something already existing, and it speeds things up. Then we move into kind of the second area where actually that piece of technology or that product starts to actually improve or evolve your existing foundation or your existing ways of working. So new and better ways of working are possible with this new piece of technology. And then finally, you move into this phase of sort of reinvention and revolution, where actually you start to see a complete shift in the way that you do things, or a complete shift in the way that you operate, a complete shift in the way that you even think about the topic or the subject that you are working in. And just to kind of coin a sort of a little parallel, just thinking about sort of the handwritten letter and how that has sort of changed over time as technology has come to pass. So, augmentation and intervention. You think about the sort of the fax, the event of the fax in I guess the late 70s, early 80s. What's really happening there is it's still a handwritten letter or it's a printed letter. It's the speed of delivery that is really being augmented there. So, you write a letter, you fax it, it arrives with its recipient immediately. Or not quite immediately as the thing kind of prints it out, etc. And then, faxes turn to emails. We're looking at a kind of a whole new sort of set of features, new set of capabilities that handwritten letter now has, thinking about kind of adding attachments or actually sharing that email with multiple people at the same time. So we're actually improving on the kind of fundamental idea of what a letter is. And then finally sort of move to kind of where we're at now in terms of communication with messenger systems or chat interfaces, that you couldn't really think of this being that much more different, except for the fact that people are communicating with each other through things like WhatsApp, through things like Slack, and the productivity revolution in terms of actually not having to wait for that letter to arrive for 3 days, but actually also the types of conversations that are taking place over those platforms really couldn't be sort of further away from the handwritten letter. And I just want to think about that AI and kind of those terms in terms of where we're at currently, and think about kind of what exactly AI can offer us in terms of those sort of 3 levels of maturity or revolution. And you think about kind of AI in terms of augmentation and intervention in the context of research. You know, we see that it can help us prepare our research studies. We see that transcription is mature. We see that kind of analysis is now being sped up in terms of our existing processes through some of the automation that AI can bring to us. We see that kind of presentation or actually bringing our insights to the engineering team to actually get into delivery is also speeding up. So I think, you know, in terms of maturity in this space, we're sort of getting to a point where AI is able to help us perform our jobs better. And perhaps that is exciting rather than scary at this point. Moving into kind of the improvement and evolution sort of side of things, you know, we're getting to the point where you can start to think about how you might micro-target your participants using insight generated from artificial intelligence. We'll talk a little bit later about how qualitative insight can be treated in a similar way as quantitative insight using things like ChatGPT. And then the idea of scaling that insight, so creating a kind of a corpus of knowledge about a particular subject or a particular project that you can then query for insight without having to go out to do field work. And in terms of where we are, I think we're sort of there. We're not quite, you know, very mature in point number 2. And then this is where it starts to get a little bit sort of science fiction-y. And I have to say, you know, I'm a cynical about AI as the next person, and actually particularly as a user researcher, I sort of start to wonder fundamentally whether AI can offer everything to us as user researchers, because what we deal in is human needs. What we deal in is human conversation and human interaction. But it's possible to imagine a point in time where generative AI can help us moderate research sessions, actually run the sessions itself. It's possible to imagine, and this has been written about a fair amount recently, AI as a participant. So actually running user interviews with AI as your participant. I have to say, I'm a little bit dubious about that, but it'd be interesting to see it happen. And then finally, this kind of idea that there may not even be a need for user research in the sort of the traditional method of it, as we gather more and more kind of insight into the world around us, and we can create actually a queryable corpus of all human behavior that we can use for any projects. I think we're a long way from that, and we're not going to be talking about that in any particular way today. But that's where the scary stuff comes in, I think. In terms, though, of this particular presentation, we're going to really approach it in the context of what Fernanda was talking about earlier. So thinking about the sort of phases of running a, let's say, qualitative research project. So where AI can help us plan. So thinking about how we identify users, how we identify key research questions we want to explore. Thinking about how AI might help us actually set up and run fieldwork or research studies. The third part will then look at the analysis side of things, so how we're using AI in particular ways to speed up the analysis process. And then finally, the last 2 sections, how it's actually helping us deliver both to clients, but also within our own teams. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how AI might work across the whole product lifecycle to help us scale and where that fits within research specifically. So talking about planning, how are we currently using AI in terms of planning? There's sort of 3 areas that we are currently employing it to help us speed up that initiation process when we get a briefing from a client or a colleague. The first is around investigation. So typically we will conduct a formal amount of desk research to understand the problem that we're trying to solve. That can, or has in the past previously, kind of lent on us doing a lot of Google research, looking at people like Forrester, looking at people who are expert in the particular vertical in which we're looking at, quite a lot of time under our belts, gaining insights in kind of quite a strategic way to understand the market or the vertical in which we're looking. Currently, we're able to shortcut that by using things like ChatGPT or Barely. So ChatGPT you can query with questions and start to get quite a good summary of the audience and also the vertical you're looking at. Barely also will summarize web pages for you. So as you're kind of reading through a web page, you don't need to read through the whole thing. You can use bare drop-down Y, I should say, to summarize what you're seeing. The second area is around informing. This is sort of the flip side of what I was just talking about with the investigate. So whereas investigate, you're looking at a kind of a whole market piece. From an informed perspective, you can start to use AI to understand existing data that's held by your client. So looking at customer service data, using something like ChatGPT to kind of create a compendium of that information that's queryable. We can look at prior research very quickly and summarize it rather than having to wade through pages and pages and pages of management consultant decks and other information that's held by the client just to help us focus our studies. And then the final sort of area is around actually sort of identifying the suitable research questions we want to be asking in any sort of field work. So generating suitable hypotheses, generating those research questions, and also actually thinking about the testing methodologies we want to use in order to bring that out. Board of Innovation has a load of free resources that kind of help you set out a load of problem statements or create hypotheses or how might we questions. And it's quite a useful way of actually just sort of really focusing in on the field work that you want to create. Fernanda's going to just talk a little bit about one of these things in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so what I wanted to share with you is my experience on how I use AI during planning. And particularly, I find myself using ChatGPT a lot at the research planning stage. And how I use it as a sounding board. So when it comes to planning, for example, scenarios, discussion guides, a little bit like Anastasia mentioned that when we started this call that she was using ChatGPT for prompts, and then she realized that she didn't like the openers that they were given. That is why I find ChatGPT useful, because during planning stage, as a researcher, you're thinking, and sometimes our nature is to overthink things and say, oh yeah, maybe I want this, maybe I don't want this, how do I frame it? And when ChatGPT is almost like, for me, it's like my friend, let's say, where I'm like, how does that sound? And or gives me some options, and I'll be like, no, actually, that doesn't sound right. And it helps me to get to the point where I'm like, this is not what I want, but now I know what I want, or this is how to frame it. And also, this is particularly good if you are not a native speaker, for example. Sometimes you might want to frame things differently and so on. So it's quite an important one for me. It has been life-changing. So as I mentioned, it has helped me generate questions, scenarios, or sometimes even simulating user responses to make my discussion guides stronger or kind of anticipate what could be the next question that I could ask. So yes, I use it a lot like as a prompt inspiration, let's say, thinking about different methodologies and so on. So if we move to the next slide, please. I'll give a few examples what you could use. So for example, in terms of script, there is this tool for the Board of Innovation, which they have different tools. Maybe I should have put like the actual web page of everything, but I picked the ones that I found most relevant to my case. But you'll see, for example, you have the interview script. So you have some prompts. What is the background and context of, in this case, our client? Let's say it's an energy client. What is the target audience? And what are the research questions? And based on that, it generates an interview script. And again, it's more like a guide. I think it's like a thought starter rather than, oh, I'm going to grab and use this exactly as it is. I think it just accelerates that thinking process. In terms of a scenario creation, again, the Board of Innovation has a very interesting tool that, for example, helps you if you have a usability testing or if you have some sort of concept testing that you want to prompt your user to think about different instances in their life or in the context of the product. So you could put, okay, what is a product or service? Let's say that you are trying to sell some medicine. The industry, well, is the pharma industry. In which year? So if this is kind of like thinking probably like in the futuristic type of bit. You could be like, oh, I put here 2030. So based on that, it gives you a few scenarios that you could use on your research. And yeah, again, reiterating, use this more as an inspiration. And then lastly, simulating user responses. So for example, okay, let's say you want to ask some questions, you want to, it's almost a bit like potentially role-playing a bit with ChatGPT. So as a 60-year-old customer, how would you typically track your energy expenditure? And then you will read the responses. So you're like, okay, you're already doing a bit of an analysis, and then you could shape another question. So for me, those have been the 3 most useful, and I highly recommend it, without just kind of emphasizing that it is very important still to add that level of ourselves being human and saying this is not the right thing, but it was great for inspiration. And that's it from me.
Great, thanks, Fernanda. So moving on to kind of the setting up and running of studies and what we can do in these kind of spaces utilizing AI. So the first bit, which is something that actually that Fernanda touched on, is kind of assisting in terms of drafting the tasks and scenarios and other elements of discussion guides. As she said, I think in our experience, it's a good starting point, but actually there's not yet a good substitute for a proper user researcher actually going through these things, making sure that they're fit for purpose in terms of actually running the field work. The second thing is really thinking about kind of assets. So recently we've been testing a load of propositions for a new business idea, obviously working quite closely from a research perspective with the strategy team, but actually not necessarily having design resource available to help us. Now, propositions are pretty bland and blah when you present them to people without some kind of imagery around them, so that they can sort of start to associate the visuals with what it is that you're trying to effectively land in the marketplace. So we've used Midjourney as a way of just very quickly creating design assets that we can add to our research materials, just to make them feel a bit more alive, a bit more relevant, and a bit more real. And then the final area is around actually running whole pieces of fieldwork with artificial intelligence sort of supported platforms. So thinking about kind of the sorts of things you might actually be able to do in terms of getting qualitative insight, but a kind of a quantitative level. And actually, that's the thing that I'm going to talk a little bit around now. So recently we ran a project with this company that I was talking about earlier, who are looking to launch a solar energy proposition into the UK market. They're unsure about kind of how it's going to land. They're unsure about what the proposition is going to be. And because typically in the past, what we would have done is run a load of discovery interviews and then do something more quantitative, like a survey, just to validate the findings from the discovery interviews. We found this platform called Loops, which allows us to effectively do both things. So you can run a survey, you can validate a proposition at a quantitative level, but you can also capture qualitative feedback across a number of different people. So we sent this survey out to 300 respondents. And obviously that's a lot of qualitative data to go through. I'm sure we've all had the experience of having to go through Excel spreadsheets of surveys where there's a free text option and you're trying to analyze the sentiment or analyze the content of those free text responses. It's not a lot of fun. It takes an awful lot of time, and actually the cognitive load for a human being to be thinking about what the common themes are, it can be quite challenging and quite tiring. What's good about Loops is it has ChatGPT built into it. But further to that, it's not that it just has ChatGPT built into it. It also stores that information in an isolated way. So it's not using GPT's sort of broader knowledge. It's only focused in on the information you've collated from that piece of research, which is obviously great from a GDPR perspective, but also great because it means that your insights, in theory, don't get polluted by the kind of wider corpus of knowledge that GPT is drawing on. So this is just some of the imagery taken from the Loops findings. So what it will do is it broadly pulls out a lot of the qualitative information as quotes, but it will also categorize them on your behalf. It will theme them. It also anonymizes the responses, which is quite handy. So these names that you see in front of you are made up names. I've never met an Ernestine before, although I do have a son called Ernest. So there you go. It also, does the standard stuff around kind of the survey responses. And if you want to kind of dig into more detail, it has that GPT AI assistant that you can actually then query. So you can get it to summarize things. You can get it to dig quite deeply into things. You can sort and filter the different audiences or different types of category and really dig into kind of the findings. I think this is quite powerful because typically qualitative insight is limited to 6 people or 12 people, depending on the size of your field study. When you're looking at much larger groups of people, you can really start to bring out some key insights, but also persuade clients who often have a kind of a more quant mindset about the way that they want to take in kind of research and data. So the next section is around analysis, and this is really kind of the point at which AI can help us speed up processes and also kind of get us to delivery quicker, I think. So I'm sure everyone here has used transcription and translation in the past, sentiment mapping. AI is doing a great job of helping us turn audio into written text. It's much, much easier to pull quotations, to compare like for like interview findings and that kind of thing. In terms of then running analysis sessions in terms of affinity mapping or theming or summarizing insights, Miro has I mean, it's a bit spotty, but Miro has an AI application that does affinity mapping on your behalf, or will theme post-its into groups on your behalf. Again, a bit spotty. It will get better over time, I suppose, but it certainly shortcuts some of the effort required to kind of bring those themes together. And then sort of the final area is around kind of being able to investigate larger sources of data. So this kind of goes back to spotting those patterns and insights and findings like loops that I was talking about earlier. And I think Ola's now going to talk a little bit about all of these 3 things in the context of Dovetail.
Yeah, should I drive, or are you okay to just say next every screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, just say next, that's fine.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, I've been using Dovetail. We've been using it actually for a while now, for a few years, but there's lots of different programs out there like Dovetail AI as well, which is not Dovetail, it's a different program. But Dovetail AI is from Pipestream, another company. Then there's Dovetail and there's Snr, which used to be called User Tribe. The main thing is, I don't know, Snr is a bit iffy because they're like focus less on analyzing and more on creating marketing that's on point. And it's like, I'm not sure if I agree with that sentiment either. But what we have looked at is like the fact that it actually gives you a tone and sentiment, as well as, so when it passes your information and the transcription, it can actually say if something's sounding negative or positive. Again, not perfect, but it's quite useful. Next slide, please. And I have personally used Dovetail quite a lot for different reasons. And one of the things I use, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Dovetail, but the tagging functionality is really, really cool. And what it allows you to do is, as Max was saying, like convince clients very well, simply by turning sort of qualitative into quant, because what you do is you tag things in the transcripts that you've received from your interviews. And then you can get visualization using the sort of charts tool, which allows you to kind of immediately see how much of an impact something is having. For example, if there's like a problem that keeps popping up, or a challenge or business, or something that's positive as well. It really, really can be used in different ways as well, which is really cool, because you can use tags to create personas, for example. You can use tags to create, synthesis and analysis. So like you can say behavior, motivation, you can sort of tag them in different ways, which is really cool. And there are new AI capabilities being introduced. So I've just tried this today. Next slide, please. I've been working on a project for a utilities client. And when you log into Dovetail, you'll see there's like a cluster by AI themes option. And you can actually just, once all your highlights are pulled out, it basically automatically gives you kind of, affinity maps your highlights by tags or by AI themes. What I've noticed is the thing that is kind of missing for me is that maybe me preempting the human touch of me saying, I want these tags to be, you know, organized with AI into these sections. And I think maybe that's, if anyone from Dovetail is listening, that could be quite useful. But basically for now, I've noticed what I am using it for is to double check myself. So like I'll do my own sort of affinity mapping and grouping in user journeys or user flows. And I'll also then do just basically duplicate that board and do an AI theme and check if I've missed anything. And that's been quite fun and useful as well, because so far I haven't missed too much, but sometimes there's something that I haven't thought of, which is quite cool. I really like AI, I mean Dovetail AI as well, because they have a very clear vision and transparency of AI use. They have on their blog, if you go, I'll actually share the link as well on the chat. If you go onto their actual website, you can read up about what they see the vision for Dovetail using AI is, and it's quite transparent. And I really like that, because I think there's a lot of companies jumping on the bandwagon, shall we say, of AI. And it's really nice to see a company kind of saying, no, this is what we are going to use AI for. This is how we see it being used, which is really cool. Next slide, please. So this is again an example of it. When I tried the AI tagging, the AI sort of alignment, what it did is sort of pulled out the community tags, and it misunderstood them as environment, because I was actually talking about you know, community as in not the same way. I wasn't using the word in the same way that sort of the AI kind of understood it. And it kind of tagged them all under saving money in the environment, but like community wasn't part of the environment or saving money. Community is actually another thing, but obviously AI kind of just grouped those two together because for some reason environment and community were seen as the same thing. So that's just one example. It's not perfect, but you know, like I said, you see patterns that you haven't seen before. Yeah, next slide, please. And that the big thing I think is really, really cool is that it allows you to scale, which I think Max might talk about in the next section a little bit further about how we're looking at scaling. But one of the things that I've been really interested in is how we work, for example, for a lot of industry-like clients. So, you know, you might have 3 different, and this is obviously not to say we're sharing insights, but what it might be able to do is, for example, start creating global tags and project-based tags. And then when you have sort of almost like a bucket of like, oh, you know, all the utilities clients come across these same global tags, these same challenges, for example, you could start doing an innovation kind of thing on top of it. So I think there's going to be a lot of power in that in the future. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about in terms of Dovetail. The one thing about Mirror that I have noticed is usually the classic use, and I think Mirror and Post-it were, you know, on it before anyone else was, before AI. They realized that lots of people hate writing sticky notes over digitally, and they basically created an app for this. So there's an app for it, it's the Post-it app. Basically it allows you to take photos of your workshop notes and then basically upload them to Mirror directly. And I was thinking like, that's a brilliant thing. We've been using that for a while now, but I can see that Mirror is starting to introduce other things, like, for example, grouping, things like removing imagery, mind mapping. There's a whole bunch of features that are coming in, and I haven't used them yet, but I must say the Post-it app works like a treat. So I'm excited to see what Mirror brings out next. Yeah, next slide.
Cool. Moving on to delivery, I appreciate we're sort of running time-wise. So in terms of the delivery side of things, we found that it can be quite useful in terms of bringing presentations together, or at least certainly structuring presentations. So when you've got a load of insights and you've got a bit of a presentation kind of flow that you want to put in front of people, we've used something called Beautiful AI in the past to actually bring that together into something coherent that you can kind of put in front of clients. Now, obviously, there's a question about whether that's actually any more efficient than just having a template that you want to reuse. And I have to say, sometimes it's a bit spotty around the edges in terms of the way it designs slides and that kind of stuff. It's not particularly happy to utilize your existing design or brand guidelines within your own slide templates. But it's a possibility that this will kind of improve over time. The second area is around actually then taking your findings from research and actually utilizing AI in the design process in order to create those improvements and those assets at face. And that's something that Ola's about to talk to you about in the context of Wizard that she's been using. And then the final sort of area is around sort of generating other types of artifacts. And the one area we've seen so far is the creation of archetypes and personas. And again, the Board of Innovation has a a free sort of suite of resources, of which one is to create a persona based on information that you might have gathered from fieldwork or research. But actually, the persona generation thing seems to be quite common across a number of different other sites as well. I have to say I've not used these yet. I quite enjoy the process of creating personas in terms of actually thinking around a problem, thinking around an archetype and what might help the design team. So I've not kind of stepped into that world yet, but we'll be testing it out soon.
Yeah, and I think this is about wizards. So I basically paid instead of there's a lot of these tools out there, and again, I'm saying this because I think a lot of companies are jumping on the bandwagon of oh, it uses AI, and Wizard is actually $12 to use. However, if you get 5 people to sign up, you get the pro version for a month. So we tested it out and took it for a spin to see how things worked. So if you can go to the next slide, Max, please. What I did see is they have this, like, for example, predictive heat mapping tool, which is absolutely awful, I think. We've actually just run some real heat mapping testing with a client whose name I've taken off, but using Userberry, and you can see the heat mapping is a click specific, so it's very good, whereas the predictive heat mapping just basically highlighted everything. So not as useful, especially around the adverts, which were not looked at all, which could be very misleading. I can imagine lots of marketing teams getting on that and just kind of using it to sell advertising space. Next slide, please. There's also wireframing. So this was really interesting because I was really excited about this. This is the thing that I think would save me lots of time, and similarly to the post-it notes, from writing by hand to transcribing digitally. The tech is really, really advanced for some reason in terms of text transcription. But when I've taken, if they've got this wireframe scanner tool, if you go to the next slide as well, I tried different things. I was like, maybe my wireframes aren't good enough, and I like cut it down. I tried to edit it. I was going into Photoshop. I'm like, this is taking you more time than it needs to be. But that'll teach me to wireframe on whiteboards, I guess. But what I did notice is the text is incredibly sensitive. So like your adventure starts here is written in like almost my scrabbly cursive writing, and the tech really picked that up. The adventure starts here is really, really picked up well. It even picked up like lorem, like random words that I didn't actually intend to write, but that was quite interesting. So we tried. I was like, someone else give me a more neat wireframe, please, and we tried it again. If I can go to the next slide. This is another wireframe, 2 sets of wireframes I got from another UX designer and researcher from our team, Gloria. She's a senior UX designer, and she was like, yeah, go have it. This one I've done by hand, and this one is a little bit neater, try them both. And again, the text was picking up exactly as, like even on the left-hand side, you can see 4 HCPs very badly. But yeah, in terms of the actual wireframing, not so much. And it kept putting in images of like oceans and ferns, which was unnecessary, I thought. Next slide, please. So this is just to talk about a client we've actually worked with. They're called Cinch. And I was looking at like, maybe I could try and see to like sort of backtrack it, see if we give it something we've already created, what would happen? Because I was like, I'm not giving up on this. So try next slide, please. This is, they've promised to give you a wireframing tool based on text prompts, which I was, again, very excited to try. So I was like, cool, I'm going to use this. I said, create on your homepage for customers in the UK to be able to buy cars. The site should feature the option for customers to find a car, part exchange their own car, or buy a new car. And basically just gave it like 300 characters, which is the maximum you can give it. I wanted to give it more information, but I think this is the bit where if you spend time getting really good at prompt writing, you'll be better at this. However, it literally took me about 20 minutes rewriting this prompt to get into 300 characters, which is kind of counterintuitive to the exercise, because I could have spent 20 minutes wireframing. But next slide, please. This is what I actually got out of it. And it was quite interesting because I think in terms of, there's obviously pros and cons. In terms of the pros, like I can see this being used by people who are coming into the industry and sort of learning, but in terms of the kind of clients we work for, I don't know if this would be useful for me, like on the daily basis, maybe to just get like initial prototypes going. But there's a search function at the top of the page. Yep. White Cinch and how it works. They've included that. The logins there, again, the text stuff is really good. They've even given us like prototypes, like, to click through. It's given me more than I need. However, it's not included things I've actually specifically mentioned the prompt. So again, and the design aesthetic that was received was questionable. So I think there's still got a little bit of further to go. Next page, please. And I think Max will talk about scale.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit then about scale, and this is where I think we start to get into the sort of, I mean, you've seen that there is some flaky behavior going on with AI and some of the examples we've given already, but I think this is where it starts to get into the space of quite important business efficiency stuff, but being potentially a little bit further in the future in terms of whether we can get scared or excited about it. So in terms of the first sort of area, ops enablement, so there's an opportunity here for us to take our insights and turn them into user stories in an automated way and actually add them into backlogs for the delivery teams to deliver against. There's a whole other area in terms of corpus building, which I touched on a bit earlier, and Ola also touched on in terms of creating multiple studies. So typically for us, we'll have a client engagement for a year to 18 months to 2 years. And over that course of time, we'll be running a number of different types of studies, whether they be quant, whether they be qual, whether they be longitudinal, etc., etc. And all of that information currently is stored in the researcher's head and the team's heads in terms of actually being able to connect the dots between the different studies. We create artifacts like customer journey maps. We create artifacts like user needs logs that are living documents that will change over time. However, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of detail lost in that kind of approach. And so there's a real opportunity, I think, here to create a database. And I would be very surprised if big companies such as Microsoft are not already doing this and then using artificial intelligence to kind of query that, both when you want to launch a new feature to see if you can kind of scoop up previous insights, or indeed just to think about what it is that you need to be thinking about to be adding as new features sort of further down the line. And then the last sort of piece is around actually then, if you're able to build these corpuses, thinking about how they then expand into cross-vertical databases of information that, again, AI can help you to understand whether there are learnings from the automotive sector that can be brought to bear in the energy sector, that kind of thing. And, this is a bit of a shameless plug, but, we are starting to think about this at CI&T. And we have launched recently something called CI&T Flow. And whilst this very complicated diagram will kind of give you the implication that this is very much more focused on the development side of things. So at the moment, the teams are really, really focused on launching artificial intelligence products that will help our engineering teams to scale in terms of quality assurance, in terms of writing code and creating code bases, in terms of thinking about kind of efficiency within the actual build side of things. There are a couple of pieces of work that we're working on at the moment that probably directly impact us. So you'll have seen the logo for CI&T Cortex on the previous slide. That is a piece of work that's live, I think, at the moment, or at least certainly at proof of concept stage, whereby insights or ideas can be automatically generated into user stories and then populate backlogs for the design team and the engineering team to kind of build out. So you can see that there's potentially an output connection to an input from research through to build. And then the second area in which there is currently research or development going on at the moment in terms of developing a PhD is in that kind of corpus building focused sort of area in terms of actually what does that look like if we grab all of our insights together and pull them into a database, and how might we query that for the different types of information. So that's the kind of watch this space type of situation. It's currently being built. Maybe we can come back and talk about it once it's actually done. We're just kind of winding up then. So we've talked a little bit about some of the things we've used, some of the good things, a lot of the bad things, I suppose, in terms of maturity. I think it's probably just worth thinking about, the things we need to look out for when we use AI, and particularly when we're dealing in the kind of qualitative research space. So the first is that often AI will come back to you with shallow responses in terms of the findings that it gives you. It seems to lack a certain level of depth of insight. Now, as researchers, you'll know that the depth of insight is actually where often the real value is. The summary is fine, but actually often the summary of information that you find from a research project might as well have been found from doing Google searches or looking at existing research that's out there already. So it's probably not worth trusting AI completely. You're not going to be able to not do any analysis ever again. I think you need to actually be looking into your findings in great detail. And these all sort of fall out of that as well. So large language models tend to struggle with language nuance, we have found. So they will often miss verbal cues for sarcasm or irony. They will often misunderstand metaphor as something literal or idioms within different languages. Similarly, they can sometimes struggle or stumble with the context of what participants are talking about. So you'll have seen from Ola's example, in fact, the context was the issue there in terms of picking up the word community that was within the question and thinking it was part of the answer. But similarly, when participants do things like call back to previous comments that they've made, or explore hypothetical situations, or start to sort of get into storytelling mode, AI can sometimes struggle. Translating emotion, again, we've done work with the Ministry of Justice in terms of user research with with people going to court, so potentially going to prison. Obviously, emotion is an extremely important part of that conversation, how people are feeling about their kind of upcoming court dates, and what we can do to kind of create digital services that allay their fears and help them kind of understand that sort of thing. Using AI, often it kind of misses out on the idea of people's sensitivities and people's feelings. And so obviously that's an absolutely critical thing in certain types of projects. Purpose and motivation, user testing specifically, we don't just listen, we also watch and learn when people are doing things with prototypes or with websites. And AI completely lacks the understanding of what a person's motivation is because it's unable to connect the visual with the verbal. So that's something in which kind of human user research kind of already has an advantage. And then the final area is around visible bias. I'm not sure if you'll remember the story from a few years ago now, when Microsoft tried to launch an AI Twitter account, and within a matter of days, it was becoming kind of racist and sexist and hurling abuse at people on the social media platform. There is undoubtedly going to be a level of visible bias within artificial intelligence, large language models. The problem is we don't know, they're now more mature and we don't actually know what that bias is. So it's even harder to tell when it's kind of more subtle, but just something to kind of take into account. And then sort of finally, just talking about kind of how we research with AI and how we defend ourselves from making mistakes by trusting AI too much. So the first thing to say is, we've mentioned it a couple of times. You get good answers with good questions, and it sounds like a statement of simplicity, but prompting is good prompting is essential to kind of drawing out the information you need from a ChatGPT type of engagement. We have found that it's quite hard to create a templated set of prompts because it sometimes changes in small ways between one session of using it and another. So generally speaking, you have to kind of rephrase questions in different ways, and in order to get kind of the different types of results you're looking for your kind of insights and findings kind of reports. The other thing to sort of talk about is, and it's been well documented, that these large language models can hallucinate. They can come up with information that simply is not there. And therefore, it's important to tell, or it's essential to take an approach of not trusting the responses without verifying yourself. So Ola gave a really good example of how she does that with Dovetail. In fact, she does it the other way around. She creates those groups herself and then uses AI just to kind of sense check her own results. It would be the worst thing possible to go into a client and claim that there's a specific user need, only to find out that the artificial intelligence has completely made it up. So there's definitely some caution required here. And then the final thing is, and again, this might just be to do with me, but personally, I find that doing is knowing. You know, as user researchers, we are responsible for the voice of the customer. We are responsible for representing that voice of the customer to the client and to the teams that are working on building products for those users. The more we rely on automated processes, the harder it is for us to really, really get to the heart of understanding those people. And I definitely found it in using loops when it was very, very easy to get summarized findings from the information that we'd gone out to market with. But when it came to presenting it back to the client, it became very difficult to actually understand the depth of the insight or the depth of the nuance around what we were presenting. So in terms of kind of working with AI, I think it's very much at this point in time a very assistive thing, but we still need to put in the hard yards if we want to be effective at representing the voice of the customer.
It's not all doom and gloom. Just thought we'd leave on a positive note, but I don't know how many of you have been following the like actors strike and the writers strikes. It was really interesting to read about that because it's one of the few, I think, institutions that have had to actually put out contractual, notes about how AI should be used going forward, because it really affects the work of writers. And exactly to what Max was just saying about how, part of the work is actually putting the words down on paper. And that is something that is very, we are human, we experience human things, and then sharing those things are stories. So like if we give that, away to something else, are we giving away, what are we giving away, I guess. So it was really interesting about this because basically the writers won and the actors won, and the main outtakes of this contract were that AI can't write or rewrite literary materials, and AI generated material will not be considered source material under the MBA. So that means basically AI generated writing can't be used to undermine a writer's credits, which is really interesting. And then the other thing that was really interesting was that there's something around consent, which I think is really beautiful. Basically, they wrote this into the contract saying that a writer can choose to use AI when performing writing services if the company consents and provides the writer follows the company policies, whatever they may be. However, the company can't require the writer to use AI software when performing writing services. So it really closed it off to like exploitation, where companies just go, give me a script quick, and they force the writer to do something they don't want to do. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think we're at the stage where we actually get to decide, and that's really exciting. So just wanted to leave you with that. Thank you. I think that's us.
Thanks, guys. That's it. Sorry, it went on for a bit longer than half an hour.
Great. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation, and we in our community, and I think everybody just loves this balance of thinking about possibilities and real life case studies. And you gave us this. And I also wanted to say what Max said about how creating persona, the process of creating persona is also very important, and it resonates strongly with me because I also tried it and with other artifacts, and it's just, I'm sure that the process of creating it by yourself, it is very valuable. We do not want speed, we need understanding, and we build this persona, for example, and this process matters. Okay, we have some questions in the chat, and I will start reading them. But also, if you want to say your questions with your voice, raise your hand. We also love when people just jump in and ask their questions. But in the meanwhile, I will read what is in the chat. And the first question was technical. How you deal with the token limit for summarization, chunking the text manually, and length chain. I have no idea what is this. Probably some tool for language models.
Yeah, the token limitation thing is a challenge. We found that on the Loops product that it was struggling with the amount of information at points, and we had to refine the searches down or filter them down in order to make sure. So sorry, if people aren't aware, I forget the exact number, but there's only a certain amount of data you can feed into ChatGPT at one particular time before it kind of breaks. Sorry, it's not more technical than that. But yeah, so some of these products will install those limits in terms of the search kind of thing. One thing we have done is that we've created a technical solution. This is not actually from a research perspective. This is for a product that we've created using GPT that creates a focused search across a piece of data, a database. So effectively, the search results are what go into GPT rather than the actual sort of body of content. So it's sort of almost the metadata. So it kind of is a sort of a shrinking factor of 4 or 5. But obviously, as researchers, that's not something we're able to build, but we luckily have engineers within our teams that can help us figure out ways around that kind of limitation. I think it will increase over time in terms of the amount of sort of data you can kind of feed in. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if GPT launch, very specific business-focused cases that allow for, greater flexibility, as long as you pay, of course. It sort of reminds me, though, of something else that I didn't really bring up in the conversation. But there is a sort of another consideration around the use of artificial intelligence around the sort of environmental impact of using artificial intelligence. I was reading the other day that asking GPT a question is uses the equivalent amount of energy of running 1,000 Google searches. So I guess you'd better be quite careful about what it is that you ask. And then actually having a conversation with GPT is roughly the equivalent of pouring a liter of water on the ground, just because of the cooling effects of the data centers required to generate it. So there is a sort of dark side, and there has been for a long time with digital generally. There is a sort of a dark side to the environmental impact of some of the stuff.
Do you have some, I don't know, artificial intelligence ops department? Because there are many technical issues, of course, and considering finding the right tools and setting them up, or do you do it by yourself?
I don't know, Max, we have something called powerhouses within CI&T. So we've got the Gen AI powerhouse, which is basically, I guess it's how we work within CI&T. They really encourage like proactive, ideation and working together across disciplines. And it's basically anyone who wants to can join the groups and then can contribute their thinking towards creating new things and organizing things. And I think across the Gen AI powerhouse itself, we've got different areas. We've got circles, we've got data strategy, development, agile, I think, and design. And there might be another one, which I might be forgetting. But that's from my side. That's what I know of. Max, I don't know if you know of anything else in terms of organizational stuff.
No, so obviously there's focus on this launch of the new product, but that is very much in the sort of the engineering side of things in terms of understanding how to use AI in the other teams. There's very much a sort of a project that is being run in by ourselves, and then if we want technical help, we'll reach out to colleagues who have that capability. But yeah, certainly there's a sort of a formal development side of things in terms of AI, and then there's a more informal, well, actually, what are our use cases for AI? How are we going to use it? What is our thinking around it? And so those two kind of connect, but they're not completely connected.
Cool. You're lucky to have all this.
Yeah, it's quite a huge amount of people. So I guess it actually, the other side of it is like the downside is that we actually don't even know half the people we work with half the time, because there's just so many people. There's 6,200 of us. So I haven't even met half the people we work with. So downsides and upsides. I like talking. So yeah.
Okay, so Anton, the author of the question about tokens, just pay your attention that Max answered quite with details and gave you more details about this technical stuff. Okay, and the next question is, have you faced any privacy issues? Because some companies have restricted the use of GPT for business purposes. And what are the policies in your company considering using of AI?
Yeah, so privacy is extremely important, and it's extremely challenging with regards to the use of AI. So Utilizing third-party platforms, we tend to be covered because there are separate agreements that we would have. So Loops, particularly, for example, isolates its instance of GPT as I understand it, which means that we can have a separate agreement with Loops in order to kind of make use of the data that they're capturing. At any rate, they anonymize the data before it enters into the platform. So they will partner up with panels, recruit people, but those people are never identified in terms of the information that's stored. So as I mentioned, I don't think I did mention earlier, but all the names you saw on the quotes, they're aliases. So that's one side of things. In terms of using Dovetail, similarly, we have separate signed agreements in terms of GDPR and the Data Protection Act here in the UK. In terms of entering information directly into GPT based on user interviews and that kind of stuff, it's a massive no-no unless the data is anonymized, because that data doesn't belong to us. We have informed consent to use it. So it needs to be anonymized before it enters anywhere near publicly kind of searchable information. Otherwise, you're kind of effectively breaking the consent agreement that you have with your users. So yeah, it's an area that is quite new to us, and we're being quite cautious with it at the moment because obviously it has implications.
How do you make this anonymization with some other AI tool?
Yeah. So I mean, it's exactly that to an extent. I mean, there are ways in which you can ensure that you truncate what you're putting into GPT, for example. But yeah, it's an area where we're certainly not that mature in yet. But anyone's got any ideas, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. This is the most difficult part, I think, for me at least, when I was trying this. Okay, there was a proposition from Anton to try GPT-4 because it is good at sketches processing. Okay, maybe I need to try. I also haven't. Have you tried processing the audio or video directly by AI? And Anton said that Anton made some Python code for this, but what about your experience?
So the only voice, because again, we're dealing with clients where there's chat GDPR regulations and things, we can only use certain, like Dovetail we can use, but it doesn't actually, I don't think it transcribes using AI. I'm not sure what the engine is there behind it. I mean, if it does, it's not making that explicit, but as far as I know, like, we're very careful. And like the other day, we actually had to delete a bunch of, Dovetail interviews off the system because it'd been, I think it's 2 years or 3 years within GDPR rules. So you have to get rid of it. So that's the only like voice to text transcription I've personally used. Someone's just mentioned saying Whisper also apparently works really well. So I'm going to try that next. But again, I'd have to look into the sort of laws. However, one of the things that's really interesting is like in the UK, the laws are very different. I also work for, I'm working on a friend's website in South Africa, and there's no laws in South Africa currently. And they literally, he came to me going, oh, I'm just going to use ChatGPT for all the interviews. And I was like, no, don't do it. Because I had to sort of explain to him why ChatGPT can't write your user script for you because it's not going to know what to ask. And basically what he did is he brought the script to me, and then I sat down with him and we had like a 2-hour session going through the script and me kind of saying, yeah, you shouldn't ask questions like this. This is a leading question, and like going through it. And I think it's really interesting because I think there's a lot of loopholes, and I think people will be using those loopholes where they can. I don't know. It's kind of like it goes into ethics territory as to what you should and what you shouldn't do as well. And I think that's really interesting because, it comes back to consent and all that. I don't have anything else to say on that, really.
Okay, and now I'm sorry, I can see that I confused the reply from Max with reply from Anton with reply from Max. So Anton is giving us some technical information. So I think that after we end our meetup, I will have this chat text and I will save everything and include it in our follow-up email. Okay. Do we have more questions?
I'm going to have to send my apologies. I have to dash because there's a client meeting I have to go to this evening. So thanks everyone for your time. I don't know if you're hanging about, but
I can stay, so I'm going to hang out in the room. Thank you so
lovely
much.
to meet everyone. And yeah, good luck with everything. I'm really interested to hear what everyone else's experiences are. So yeah, good to kind of hear about that stuff. Yeah, pleased to meet everyone, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Yeah, I have a question if nobody is jumping in. I'm curious, how do you, so you found like a couple of solutions of how you could use and kind of leverage your work using different AI tools and like you find those work. How do you then kind of scale this knowledge like within your organization? I don't know, because it's three of you and if you're communicating and everything works, but on a scale in an organization where there's dozens or even more people, do you like do a sharing knowledge events or you do a formal trainings like if you're a designer, use this and that prompt in ChatGPT, and then you can get this and that benefits. How it works?
Oh my gosh, you asked the right person, because this is like something that's really, I'm passionate about spreading knowledge, and that's kind of our team has been given different tasks, so that's my kind of remit, like knowledge sharing, and it's really exciting because we have within our group, so I don't know if Max didn't give the context of this, but we actually became CI&T. We used to be Somo Digital before, so we've gone through a merger in the last year, so we fully merged at the beginning of the year, and it's been really interesting, the journey from having a team of 25 to now suddenly having a team of about 50, 60 all over the world. And like Max said, we had no research team per se, everybody did everything, and now we have a research team proper with, you know, Max being the director of research proper. So what we have is we've got bi-weekly XD, which is XD is sort of our name for research design and experience, basically, and we have bi-weekly meetups, which are semi-organized in that Pete, who's one of the heads of design, sort of organizes by checking if anyone has anything to share on sort of a bigger level, and then that is brought to the group every week, every 2 weeks, which means it includes AI, it includes any work we've done that's interesting to share. We try and share case studies internally, because obviously some people are working on projects for like 8 months or 10 months and they might not see anything else. So it's really interesting for us to share it that way. The second thing is, as I mentioned, we've got the generative AI powerhouse. So the powerhouses are a CI&T concept, but it's very much, we use Google Chats. So we've got these sort of Google Chats, ongoing conversations basically going on. And it's kind of, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's quite a lot of them, but I sort of subscribe to a few that I find really useful. And the stuff that comes out there, like actually the stuff Anton was sending to me, I've actually seen one of the things, I think Whisper has been mentioned by someone on the chats, and I was like, damn it, I didn't check it before we came. I should have looked at it. But yeah, basically there's ongoing conversation all the time about this stuff. And within our design group, again, there's a few of us who are specifically looking into AI and how it can be used. And I think someone the other day actually shared we've like a chart of like, here are the different AI tools currently that we know of, here are what we've used, here's what we've trialed on projects, so people can actually kind of go to someone and ask them about it, who has used it. And then the other thing, we have a Notion. So we have an internal Notion where we sort of try and keep, it's almost like a data repository of all the information we find, because there's literally like a list of about, I'm not kidding, like 300 tools now that all say they use AI. And there's definitely ones we're looking at that are favorites and that we use more often. For example, ChatGPT is obvious. But there's other ones that like we've tried once or twice, like Wizard, I wouldn't, personally, I'm not going to get it. I can see how like that would be really valuable for like a designer who's a one-man team who has to do UX and UI, and you know, he just needs to get started, for example. But yeah, I don't know Those are the three main areas. And then we also have sort of company-wide catch-ups, which are sort of more formal, and those are sort of less regular. I would say they might be made like every 2-3 months, and that's organized by the Gen AI leads. So they are people who are actually internally working on Cortex, internally working on the CI&T project. So they have a business kind of line to it, not just an internal sharing. There's also like a revenue stream there. So, you know, for example, they're working with clients to bring them up to speed with using ChatGPT or you know, created products, for example, which we are working with some clients currently. So yeah, there's different sort of areas. So there's like more informal and a more formal business side of things as well. Sorry, really long answer.
That's really interesting because we had a smaller amount of design niche practitioners, probably like you have right now, and current scale does not work the way it worked before. So we had a similar regular meetings. Now we have hundreds of people, like 1,000 plus, and now it doesn't work because you cannot do like a regular meeting for 1,000 people. That just doesn't work. So it's kind of became silos, and it's a different kind of story. But anyway, yeah, I can talk also too much. We have another. We have another actual question in the chat.
Yeah, so obviously CI&T takes AI very seriously. This is great.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question, you were talking about the cons of using AI, and so the question is why it is a cons typing interview questions using ChatGPT, and how can we use it properly or correctly for entry juniors, UX designers?
Interesting. I think the main thing I would say is don't just trust blindly that it's given you perfection from day one. And my experience of it is, as a junior, obviously, I mean, I've been a junior myself, like I still don't know everything. I make mistakes all the time, like even as a senior, as a lead. I wouldn't trust that, because it's almost like just going on your own intuition, like saying, I know I'm right, I'm perfect, you know, like it's not right. It's like there's always bias. There's always, with AI, you introduce hallucination, you introduce so many other factors. And I think the main thing to do is use it to check your own work, or use it as a backup or a double up, rather than just asking it. Like, for example, in this example that I was talking about, Rowdy, it's my sister's husband who runs a leather working company, and they have an e-commerce website, and they sell bags, leather handbags. So plug for them, but they're basically redeveloping their entire digital world. And he was like, I don't have the money for user interviews. So but he comes from a background where he has experience doing interviews at university. And he said to me, I'll just use ChatGPT to write the interview questions. And I was like, cool, okay, I'm worried about this, but go for it. And then he said, you know, it'll mean there's a lot less time taken for it. And I was like, great. And then he came back, and the questions were very basic. They were very much like, what's your age? You know, it's like demographic questions. And it was like, well, what are we actually finding out here? What do we need to find out? And are we finding that thing out by asking these questions? So I had to go through it with him. And what we found was there was a lot of good stuff, but they were all very kind of top level stuff. And I think what you find is, in an interview, sometimes as an interviewer, you will go through and ask a question, and then you'll follow the person's responses, and then you'll kind of go down a rabbit hole. And you know, ChatGPT is great at maybe giving you the entry, but it might not know what to ask afterwards. And it's like, that will be like with anything, I think. And there's a nuance to it, which I think takes time and practice to also get into. But I would just always be aware that, you know, just don't trust blindly. That's my advice generally. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else in the team, you know, on the board who's here, like, has had any experience with that, but that would be my advice to juniors. Just, yeah, don't trust it blindly. Get it checked either by yourself or by someone else. Yeah, or, you know, just, yeah, don't just take it for word for word.
That's quite an extensive answer. Thank you, Ola. And Ola, are you up for a couple more questions? Because
yeah, go for it. I'm here. Yeah. Of course.
left, so you are left alone.
If I can't answer something,
everything.
I'll come back. I'll ask the questions to the team, and I'll bring back the answer to you.
Okay, Andrea, I think you had more questions, right?
I think we we could ask probably audience if they have any questions, because I'm also in a similar group inside my organization who are working with AI and establishing and how we can leverage it and all this. So I can talk a lot. But probably there's some other questions if we have.
You can ask, I think. I think we will wrap up in, I don't know, 5-8 minutes. So let's talk about one last question and we will be finishing.
Mhm.
Yeah, Andrei, I was talking to you.
To me. I think I don't really have a questions. I can share like probably how we used the question about the juniors and the people who are learning, probably my personal experience. So we have in some of the internal programs on educating people on how to actually, so we have a certification, internal certification program where you study and align with all organization how you do technical interview in different domains. And from some time we started noticing the people who are doing, there's like a theory, sorry, I'm hard to talk. Yeah, the theory part and there's the practice part. And we started notice there's the mentors and mentee. We started noticing that the mentees are 100% doing their tasks just using ChatGPT. Like there's the task, have an interview plan and have a questions for like a senior specialist, a lead specialist. How are they different? And I'm reading, and there's like those notions that this is definitely written by ChatGPT. Now I have like markers of the words, exact words, which are too complex for people. They never use that. And I know this is definitely written by GPT.
This is how children now do their homeworks.
Probably, yeah. And we had like a discussion internally with mentors, like, do we actually want that? Because and the questions are actually really good. When you look into them, like those are great questions. I've changed my script for interviewing, borrowing some of them. But the question is, if people actually able, so they did not create them, they just borrowed them blindly, are they able to interpret the answers if they like didn't walk the path to creating the actual questions? Which was an interesting internal discussion. We actually don't conclude it if we want to prohibit people from using GPT, because this is like a company-wide thing, like everybody should experiment, try using it and stuff like that. And from the another side, you just say, don't use it. So it's interesting.
I guess it's that fine line of like, you lose by it's like cheating, right? In a test, it's the same thing. It's like by cheating in a test, you're not learning the knowledge. Yes, you're getting the mark, but when you walk away, you don't have that knowledge. So when that happens in real life, you won't know what to do. And it's that thing of like, I worry about this for myself from a point of view of, I know from social media how that's affected my focus. And by using social media, my focus from reading books, I used to be able to read a book in a few days. Now I'm struggling to get through a book in 2 weeks because my focus is just, I read a page and I'm like, oh, I can't. And I know that's because I use too much social media. And it's really interesting because that's something that I think is something we have to watch ourselves, like individually. Everyone has their line of where their values are and where you stand with that. But like, how do you start enforcing that in a company? I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I guess talking about it is a good point. It's a good place to start. But yeah, I think if you're cheating yourself at the end of the day. But that's a personal viewpoint from me. So I don't know. Yeah.
And Ola, we have one question more about, can you give the example what are the right questions as a guidance, at least, to ask GPT in UX design field?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very wide question. You'd have to specify, like, what task are you trying to do? Is it like for an interview, a discussion guide? Are you creating a discussion guide? Or I guess maybe what I can do is, maybe Noah, if you could like give me a few examples of what you're looking for interviews. Okay, cool. Yeah, so for a discussion guide for an interview, I guess the right questions as guidance. Oh my goodness. I think it's the prompt. It comes back onto the prompt. So let's say you have a prompt for, again, this is just my interpretation of your question. I'm not saying this is right, but I think the better your prompts are, the more how do I put this? The more descriptive they are in terms of what you're actually trying to create, the why, the better they will be. But I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of something. I'd have to kind of, if you gave me an example or two, I could kind of see if that's, the best way. But the problem is it is very much test and try at the moment, and everyone is just testing it out. Yeah.
Well, from my experience when working with interview questions, it is the most useful way to use ChatGPT is to ask ChatGPT questions and to see the response, the answer, to understand how clear is the question, because sometimes I do not really see how clearly I formulated the question. And when the answer is vague, for example, then I can understand that maybe I can give more details or make it more specific. So for me, it was the best usage.
So
but not. Yes, I tested like with an artificial participant.
Interesting.
But in creating questions, I did not find much use.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Anya. Oh, thank you for joining. Cool.
Oh yeah, okay. We have a lot of thanks for this great meetup, and really, Ola, please also tell our thanks to Fernanda and Max.
Believe me, I will.
Thank you, everybody who joined this meetup, and also those people who will watch this in recording. I'm sure you will enjoy it. And so after several days, we will send a follow-up with all the links and also with the link to the recording. We need some time to edit it and put it to the YouTube. Okay, thank you very much. You will have all links, and also you will have AI created summary of this meetup. I have no idea what the result will be. I have never used it before, but we have one hidden participant, whose name I don't know how to say correctly, Zoom IQ, who will make this summary for us. So I hope this will be helpful a bit. Okay, thank you so much, and see you on our next meetups.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, and Andrea as well. Thank you so much for organizing and for asking us to chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, and good luck. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.